Hello and welcome to our next episode of Called and Chosen. In this series, we're not focusing so much on the physical building, though this space we're in is very beautiful, but instead focusing more on the men that God has called to serve within those communities, to serve us as our priests, our pastors. And so today we have a very special guest with us, one of the newest bishops, at least in the U.S. I don't know if there is anyone newer than you here in the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
But I know, but for San Antonio, you're as new as it gets.
Right.
And that is Bishop Janak, our new auxiliary bishop here in San Antonio. And so at the very beginning, Bishop, I'd just like you to take a moment, introduce yourself, and if you'll let us know your vocation story.
Certainly, Father Scott. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a great story in terms of the fact that it's my journey, and so I'm happy to share it. I guess you might say I'm one of those lifers. I think I was 5 years old and thinking about being a priest. I was one of those that enjoyed going to Mass. My mother would say that I would watch very intently the priest and what was happening there at the altar, and I wanted to go to communion when I was very, very young, and she said, no, you have to wait. And I remember going on March was always her month to clean the church. And so I would go with her when I was small, just the opportunity to be involved and opportunity to be at the church. So I enjoyed that. And my younger sister, she would say that we played church together. So my poor little sister, she's 6 years younger than I am. And so by the time she was, I think, in kindergarten, she had gone to more, quote unquote, masses than any adult had done. I talked about it. I thought about it. What helped is my parents and my grandparents were very supportive. They encouraged my brother and my sisters and I to do and to think about a lot of things in life. And education has always been very important for my father. And so he wanted us to study hard and go to college, to have what he didn't have, those opportunities in terms of education. And yet when we spoke about different things we wanted to do, he would always say, and my mother, you know, maybe God's calling you to be a priest, though. Maybe He's calling you to be a religious sister, he would say to my sisters. And that kind of put the idea always in front of us. We knew that it was an option, that what we wanted wasn't just a job or a career, that it was about a vocation. And so that's pretty much what I thought about throughout junior high, high school. Of course, as you all know, Father Scott, it's not something we readily talk about to all of our friends. Oh, I'm going to be a priest. So I thought about other things. I kind of convinced myself. In some ways, I think I ran from my vocation for a while. I was intent on going to school, in college, a big university. I grew up in a little small town, and so having the opportunity to be in a city was exciting to me. And I did. I was accepted at University of Texas in Austin. I started there. I've always been very determined of what I wanted. I've tried my best to really work hard at whatever I was going to do. And there I was enjoying it, but yet still kind of lost. I remember sitting in an accounting class, there were like 500 students. And I'm thinking, okay, I was in the business school. It was very hard in the 1980s to get into that business school. And I sat there with all of those students. And I looked around and thought, is this really what I want to do the rest of my life? And all of a sudden, it just came. And I think that's how the Spirit works. I began going to daily Mass, the little chapel there at St. Austin's, and I would just pray, just Lord, give me direction and give me courage in a lot of ways. And then when I went home, I think it was in that fall before I entered the seminary, one of my friends that I knew, he was younger than I, he was graduating from high school, and you probably remember him, Father Dan Morales. He grew up in our town, and our parents were friends, and I heard he was going to the seminary. And I went and spoke to him, talked a little bit about it. And before I knew it, I realized it's like he was an avenue for me in a lot of ways. Like, you know, if he can do it, I can do it. And I always credit him for that it gave me that push that I needed to get over the line, so to speak. Yeah. And we started the seminary together. And at the time, that was in 1981. By 1982, after the year had turned, and I went back to UT and I was really lost, praying every day, going to Mass, and I realized I was going to do it. Went home at spring break and told my mom, I'm going to go to the seminary. And before I knew it, the parish priest got involved. My dad called him up, and he came over. And we were still part of the Archdiocese. My little town that I grew up in, Palacios, was part of the Archdiocese of San Antonio. So it was the very last parish, because if you left Palacios and kept driving on 35 south, you would go into the Galveston-Houston Archdiocese, or at that time, the diocese. And so Father Dennis Darjalek is the vocation director at that time. And so it didn't take him long to get to Palacios. And I'll never forget, my dad fried fish, had this big meal prepared, and we welcomed Father Darjalek, and it wouldn't happen now as it did then, but at that point in 1982, I just filled out papers, pretty much. This was like March. By May, I finished my semester at UT, and I was in the seminary, already accepted. We became a diocese. In May of that year, it was announced that there was a Diocese of Victoria that's erected, and a lot of it came from the Archdiocese of San Antonio. So all of a sudden, I found myself and Father Dan and 3 others as the first 5 seminarians for the newly erected Diocese of Victoria. And Father Dennis continued to be our vocation director because we were starting from scratch there. So they kind of hired these, they kind of contracted these services. And so he continued, and he had that little VW van at the time. And we all loaded up, and in August, I'd never even seen the seminary. And at the time, San Antonio was sending their seminarians, at least the collegiate seminarians, to Santa Fe, New Mexico. So sight unseen, had no idea. My mother kept thinking, because she got frightened that I was going off. She kept saying, "What are you going to do? Do you have to exchange money?" I said, "Mom, I'm going to New Mexico. It's a state. I'm not going to Mexico." And there I was, 850 miles away, and starting my life as a seminarian. It was exciting, beautiful, loved it. It was a great experience. And eventually, Father John Peters was appointed the first vocation director for the Diocese of Victoria. So he would come and visit us there at the seminary. But living in the mountains at a beautiful seminary was exciting. It was a great experience. Christian brothers taught us at the university level. And then graduation came from college, and I realized I want to continue. I really felt called. I felt called since I was little. I think college seminary confirmed that. So started here at Assumption Seminary. And I finished college a little bit early because I had some classes that I took during the summer, etc. So Father Steuben was the rector at the time, Monsignor Steuben, that we remember him now. And he was great, welcoming. They usually didn't welcome anyone in January, but I graduated in December from college. He allowed me to come in. So January of 1984, I started here. And now Bishop Billette, Father Mike Billette at the time, was my spiritual director. He was on the formation faculty. And so all the priests, I got to start to know a lot of the priests. Father David Garcia was on the formation faculty, and had a great opportunity to just kind of go right with my class. They welcomed me. I think there were 10 of us at the time in the class. And went to Oblate School of Theology, of course. Got to meet so many of the Oblates, and I was taught by them and I was formed here at the seminary at Assumption. And it's a great experience, great experience. So I was ordained in May of 1988. And in my hometown, at the time, we were allowed to be ordained in our parishes. So it was a big celebration in Palacios. I was the second priest from that community, from that particular parish. There's now, last fall, they ordained the 8th man. There are 8 priests from Palacios, from St. Anthony's, from that little parish. And so it was a big celebration. So it was exciting. And my first assignment was at Our Lady Victory Cathedral in Victoria. Stayed there and then spent my priesthood, 33 years there. Pastor of 3 different parishes, vocation director, directed the permanent diaconate. Bishop Grauman at the time was the ordaining bishop for me and stayed for a few years, and then he was transferred in 1990 to Dallas. Bishop Felhar came in, and so I had a lot of experiences working in administration, but I've always been a parish priest, which I love. I will always be a parish priest. and learn to really walk with the people and to listen to them. And eventually I went back to school. They sent me for canon law studies, and eventually on my own, I found out a lot of people had need for counseling. And so Bishop Felhar allowed me to do so, but I just did it on my own. And that was at the time where there was no online classes or anything else. I would work at the parish. I would drive to the University of Houston Victoria campus, have evening classes or a weekend class, race back after morning class on a Saturday for a wedding. It was difficult, but great experience. And so I was eventually licensed as a counselor, and just had a great experience of using that knowledge to help my Catholic parishioners and others as well, non-Catholics alike. And had great experiences in Yoakum as a pastor, El Campo for 10 years. That was the longest I was ever allowed to stay. And then 8 years I was the rector, pastor of the cathedral in Victoria. I got to go back there where I started. Wonderful experience. And at that time, Hurricane Harvey hit. I ended up having to turn an old shopping center into our cathedral center. We had to totally renovate the church. It just hurt so much. A lot of it was destroyed, the murals. We had to start with a new roof. All the murals had to be redone, all the flooring. It took months and months. Yeah. But I had great parochial vicars, 2 men that were wonderful. One of them stayed 4 years. He had an architectural background, and he helped me tremendously, Father Christopher. And we worked together. We rode that storm out together. We rebuilt that church. Just loved it. And I had pretty much things, and Father Scott, you've been in parishes, more than one parish. It's like, okay, now it's just great. Everything is just the way I want it, and there's always more to do, but let me sit back a little bit. And then I get this call. I'll never forget, February 1st, 2021. I get this phone call in the evening. I had just worked because Bishop Cahill, who came in, became our bishop, so I served him for 6 years as his vicar general and the rector of the cathedral, and helped him in his transition. And he gave me permission to start a counseling center. That was my dream. So the diocese sponsored it, close to the property there at Victory, and it was convenient. So I would go from the chancery, go to my parish office, I'd go to the center, the counseling center, back and forth all day. Loved it. So I came in, I was tired. It was a Monday. Mondays were tough because it was staff meeting. I had appointments at the center. I had progress notes to write for my clients that I saw that day. I had a meeting, an Acts mission meeting that day. Then there was something else after that I had to do at my desk to get a report done. And I look and I said, I'm going to sit down for a moment, have a little supper, and then I'm going to go to my meeting. And then my phone rang, and it said Washington, D.C. I thought it's one of those callers, those spam callers. And then I thought, well, I don't know. I did go to a workshop once in canon law for different special cases. And I thought, you never know if maybe they're calling because they want me to do something with my canon law degree or to help out in some way. So I went ahead and answered it, knowing it was probably nothing. And then I heard this distinctive voice that I'd heard on television before. Father Gary Janak. I said, yes. This is Archbishop Christophe Pierre calling from the nunciature in Washington, D.C. In my heart, I know it couldn't stop because I'd be dead, but it seemed to have stopped. I was certainly stopped in my tracks. And I remember his first question to me, are you alone? I said, well, no, my parochial vicar is down the hall, but I can get to a private place in a moment. So I went upstairs in the rectory, and then he proceeded to tell me that Pope Francis has appointed you as auxiliary bishop in the Archdiocese of San Antonio. Do you accept? It was just like that fast. And I said, Archbishop, I'm not worthy of this. I don't understand what you're asking. He said, well, you know San Antonio? I said, yes, I know San Antonio. I studied there for several years of formation. And he says, and I kept repeating it. And I'm sure he thought something was wrong with me. I don't know. Because I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy, I'm not worthy. And finally he said, why don't you sit down, Father? And so I sat down. Are you sitting down? I am, Archbishop. I'm sitting down. He says, well, good. He says, well, Pope Francis thinks you are worthy. Do you accept? And I told him, I said, I've never refused an assignment, and I've never asked for an assignment. The only time I ever asked my bishop for an assignment was if he would release me to go to Nicaragua, in Central America, to work as a missionary for a while. And he said, one day, Gary, but not now. And so I said, okay. So I said, I've always been obedient to what was asked of me. I never questioned the authority of the one asking. I said, so I do accept. And then life changed. Because he said, okay, you must keep this a secret. Archbishop Gustavo will be calling you, and you can tell your bishop and no one else. I said, yes, Your Excellency, I will do so. So for 2 weeks, I kept it a secret. Sure enough, I had to carry on. I went to my Acts retreat meeting, and they didn't know anything, obviously. And the phone rings. I excused myself. It was the Archbishop. I didn't know him at the time. I'd met him one time at Bishop Brendan's ordination. That's it. But he met hundreds and hundreds of people. I was just one. And so I knew who he was, and I knew he was very kind. He left a very good impression. The first impression he made with me was a very lasting impression of compassion, kindness. Just, it's like, God, this is a person I'd like to sit down with. I could have a conversation with this man. And that's the only thing I knew of him. So then that evening I went to Bishop Brendan's house, and he kind of looked at me. He didn't say anything because he was waiting for me to say something. And he said, I think we just kind of staring at each other. Finally he says, so did you get a call or something today? Or did you need something? Kind of like that, real innocently. And I said, oh yeah, I got a call. and I'm aware that you're aware of it. And so we sat down and talked. But that night, I remember, and I exaggerate not, I didn't sleep a wink. People said, oh, you tossed and turned. I said, no, I didn't do anything. I was in bed, totally like a mummy, totally straight, with my eyes open. And it kept going round and around and around. Like, how did this happen? Why did it happen? Why me? I can't do this. And finally, I just, of course, turned to prayer. I said, Lord, I don't understand this at all. I really don't. I'm very happy here. I think I finally have everything the way we're on the right road, at least. I know how to be a parish priest. I know how to be a pastor. I don't know the rest of what you're asking. And then that next morning, and I don't know how it happens because I'm not sure how the Spirit works, and I'm not sure how saints intercede, but I started having a relationship with Little Flower, with St. Therese. She kept coming to my mind because the words that kept coming over and over to my heart is, you have to be small. You have to be little. And I turned to St. Therese. I turned to the Little Flower. I began asking for intercession. I began reading quotes again. I picked up the story of a soul again. And I kept thinking about her over and over again. And she really helped me a lot in those 2 weeks before I could say anything. So it was a whirlwind. I mean, people were so kind. Archbishop Gustavo's been wonderful. Bishop Mike has been great. It helped that I knew him all these years. The people of the Archdiocese have been so kind. And I'm excited. I serve as vocation director now. The Archbishop's asked me to do so. I truly enjoy it. Wonderful. Our 18 seminarians are great. We have 2 men in the discernment house. I'm learning from them. I was a vocation director when I was ordained when I was 26 years old. I was a vocation director at 28 for 6 years. And so I was very young when I was a vocation director. It's different doing it now that I'm much older. I think I have a little bit more experience, maybe a little bit more wisdom. I don't know. So it's been good. And then being chancellor and working with the group that's 5 years and under ordained. And then, of course, just going around confirming and meeting young people, the wonderful priest, you and the brothers that are here. I've enjoyed it. It's been great.
I can honestly say we have enjoyed your presence, your smile, just the joy you have had, and the priesthood that it comes out in your time as bishop here with us. A lot of our priests are just really enjoyed seeing that. I do want to go a little bit into some of the stuff you talked about in your story. You mentioned the little town of Palacios. You have 8 priests out of it. And that's not a rarity, though, when you really look at the life of a diocese. That it's those small, as the rural communities, a lot of times, where we find a lot of our vocations. My area where I grew up, down in the Polish corridor, they called it, for a long time was really putting out a lot of priests for the size of the town of Paris. What do you think was the reason for that these rural parishes tend to put out so many priests?
See, and that's such a good question. People ask me that, and I think it's so true. And it certainly it is effective in large parishes as well. But one, it was the support of the pastor. I mean, I really felt, and I think Father Dan, he died of cancer a few years ago, but he would testify to the same. We had great mentor priests. It doesn't mean that we had priests that had it all together, so to speak. To be honest with you, we had a priest, God rest his soul, wonderful man from Ireland originally. And at the time, a lot of time, when priests were having difficulty, they were sent out to little parishes, rural parishes, away from the city, away from the bigger one, maybe give them less stress. We had a lot of those priests when I was growing up that were there. I called them broken in some ways. And the one that influenced so many of us, Father Brian, was, and he'd be the first to admit that, he was one of those broken priests. We knew that. There was no hiding it. The people helped him, and when he was having a difficult time in the course of a certain month or the year, whatever, they rallied around him and supported him and gave him emotional support and prayed for him and prayed with him. And I think the difference for us is that we saw where priesthood wasn't something that was unattainable. That if this man could be called a priest and admit his brokenness and knowing that it was Jesus Christ that he served and not himself, and that he could admit those weaknesses and that God's strength, as Jesus would tell St. Paul, as we read, it's like, no, I'm not going to remove that thorn from your side. It's that when you are weak, it is then that you are strong for me and with me. And this priest showed us that how that strength comes out of weakness, out of human weakness. So we didn't have that perfect model priest, so to speak, in that way. And I'm grateful for that. He showed that, because I knew my weaknesses, even as a young child. And yet I realized maybe God is still going to use me. Yeah. And then this community was supportive. They prayed for vocations. They celebrated vocations. They encouraged us. Not just my parents, but others would ask, gosh, you're up there at the altar, and I know you like to serve. And then in high school, I was a lector, and they said, you make a good priest. You ever thought about that? So the community asked. Mm-hmm. And that's where it was close-knit. The parish was the center of our lives. Our home was important, certainly, but our spiritual home was equally important in many ways. Yeah. So I think that made a difference.
I think it does. I think it's part of that reality with the way those smaller communities are built. The church really is sometimes literally the center. In Panna Maria, where I grew up, it was the first thing those immigrants built. They had no homes. Right. Their first mass was under that big giant oak tree that's there. Definitely. But it's the first thing they built was their church. Right. And so that in those smaller communities, I think there's a different understanding of faith even to some degree. Mm-hmm. It's a different way of connecting to God. Right. The lifestyle sometimes is a little bit slower. Not always quieter, but it's quieter in some degrees in that you can hear Him a little bit better.
Right. But very trusting of God.
Yes.
And knowing that it was important to participate in Mass and not just Mass itself on Sunday, but knowing it meant also the parish festival, like we call them the picnics. And it meant you don't take vacation time at that point. You take vacation time to work at the picnic. I mean, everyone worked together. It wasn't just, let me write a check. It didn't work that way. We were there. And so we would have the shrimperies, we called them, big meal and shrimp included because we were on the coast. And all of the booths and everything, and we were all involved. It wasn't just, you get to go play. It was like, no, you've got to go work. And you got to go pick up cans, and you got to go help and carry things, and it was your family.
Exactly, and that's exactly what I encountered when I was growing up. Yeah. I was, from a young age, I would do tickets and bingo.
There you go.
And what was ended up happening is they thought I was their good luck charm. And at the time, the young man thinking about the priesthood, or when I was a seminarian, I'd still go back. they'd all want to be there with a seminarian or guy thinking the priesthood was, because they thought I brought a little extra good luck or that God would bless them with a win. They're running 12 different bingo boards. I couldn't even keep up with it.
That's right.
But they could.
That's right.
And it's a beautiful thing really to see our faith, to see the church through that lens, I think, of that lifestyle. The one thing I also want to think about a little bit is, as busy as we are as a priest, it's not everything. It's not overly consuming of our life. So what are some of your hobbies and things that you do to keep yourself, to decompress a little bit?
Definitely. I love reading, and so just spiritual reading and just novels, and I like to read a lot of different things, and psychology because of my background, so that's interesting to me. And also, of course, just spending time with friends. As a parish priest, I've been so blessed to get close to married couples and their children, and you're long enough in a place, as again, Father Scott, you get to baptize their children and maybe even be blessed to give them First Holy Communion, and you see them grow, and so that's been helpful to me. And exercise. Because I have a very strong work ethic that I'm Czech, and so it was from my family background. We worked hard. We played. My dad didn't work on a Sunday. That was the Lord's day. He taught us that. But boy, did he work hard the other 6 days of the week, and we worked with them and had extra jobs so that he could support us. But I've always found that as I got into adulthood and of course ordination, I've got to take care of myself physically. And so I exercise. I've run marathons. I continue to run. I picked up a couple years ago paddleboarding. So I love to go to Canyon Lake paddleboarding. That's very relaxing, just by myself on the lake.
Yeah.
Usually early in the morning before there's any wake from those boats, those speed boats. Speed boats aren't really that much, that interesting to me. But I did learn how to water ski and kneeboard behind a boat and jet ski and things like that. My brother was always much better than I, but paddleboarding has been good for me. So things that I kind of like solitary sports. Team sports has never been one of my fortes. I like to be by myself because I love nature. I love spending time outside. So those are the things I do.
Oh, that's awesome.
I can find God in the midst of all of that.
Oh, yes.
So I've been very blessed to have those opportunities, and here, beautiful places to go. Climbing, hills and go on the lakes, and a lot of opportunities in San Antonio.
Yes, there are some beautiful opportunities to help us find that balance of what it means to be a priest.
Right, and that's what it is.
So that we
It's
can
about the
serve.
balance. Yeah.
Because if we're not taking care of ourselves, it reminds me of a phrase I learned in pastoral care of caretaker fatigue.
That's right.
If the caretaker doesn't take care of themselves, who's going to take care of the sick person when they go down?
That's right.
And for us as a priest, we sometimes have to remember, if I'm not caring for myself, physically, spiritually, I'm going to collapse at some point, and who's going to do Mass? Who's going to serve these people?
And the God's faithful really want us to be well. Mm-hmm. They do not mind when we take a day off. They encourage us to do so. They want us to have balance. And I think it is, as Scripture again indicates, in body, mind, and spirit, we have to be able to understand what moderation is, what discipline is, and what that balance is, so that we can serve Christ in His church.
Yeah.
So it's good. So I've been very blessed in being able to exercise and have some good discipline and things that I enjoy doing.
Yeah. Now, I know you also had a lot of extra ministry working, like you said, with married couples in the Diocese of Victoria. And here, to some degree, you're still keeping up with a lot of that.
Sure.
Here, as much as your schedule allows, at least. But what would you say is some of those things that has been most maybe uplifting or reinforcing for your priesthood and time as a bishop that has come out of ministering with those married couples?
Mm-hmm. I don't have the opportunity to do it as much, and I like to be able to get back to that more. But now, just when I go, I've been to many, many parishes already. I've been blessed with the opportunity to travel the Archdiocese, and it's big. It's a lot of parishes and a lot of missions and beautiful places. So just being with couples and seeing them and their families. So I see them in the context in their spiritual homes and their parishes. But I think what I've enjoyed so much, because there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of desk work, there's a lot of reports. As Chancellor, I'm the official archivist, and there's a rich history here. I mean, people don't realize that it's not just a closet where we keep our records. I mean, we have a full archives in San Antonio because we have hundreds of years of history and missions, and we have records of all of these entities. And so having a staff of 3 full-time people in the archives and all the reports that have to go to the Vatican and to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, that all comes through my office. And so I collect statistics and data, and I kind of like it. It's enjoyable, but it's also time-consuming, so I don't have as much of an opportunity. So I think my greatest outlet really is my vocation work.
Yeah.
And when the Archbishop asked me to be vocation director for the Archdiocese, I think he was hesitating a little bit. It's like, I'm sorry, Gary. It's like, no, Archbishop, this is a gift. It really has been. Because right now we just need our priest in our parishes. We didn't have the luxury of having a priest, and it has to be someone that gives full-time attention. And I live here in an apartment. I actually live where Archbishop Flores used to live, in the apartment here at the seminary, and so I'm on campus. So those seminarians and promoting vocation has been a lifeline for me. And people have been wonderful in the Archdiocese, and the Knights of Columbus and the Guadalupanas and others, organizations. I mean, they're all wanting to be active again in vocation promotion. I mean, we're going to have soon a meeting for all the lay vocation promoters, and it's the largest gathering we've had in years because the interest is there. They know we need priests.
Exactly.
And I know, Father, I've been to many, many parishes, and young people have spoken to me after I've given a homily and celebrated Mass. And I know God is planting the seed.
Exactly.
They're saying, either asking questions. We have a monthly support group for young men. We held it last night. They ask incredible questions. We have to get to the point we can't be afraid to ask them if they've ever thought about being a priest. We have to challenge them. And I go around and I get to go to all the parish schools and talk on vocations. And I say the same, and that is, we need heroes. We need those that are called to be courageous enough to answer that call. And it's a wonderful way of life. I say it over and over again. I love being a priest. I really do. I love being a priest. And the vocation work has been very, very fruitful and very life-giving to me.
I think it's beautiful to see, because I think we're starting to see a little bit of that culture of a vocation beginning to grow a little bit in our diocese. And I mean, I've encountered, I'm sure you have in your parishes, well, I don't want my son to be a priest, I want grandkids.
Right.
Or I want my son to be a doctor or a lawyer. They kind of think, I don't know if it's a step down for their son or something to consider that, but it's changing a little bit.
It is. Absolutely.
We're seeing that. And so what would be some advice you would give to helping grow that culture of what it means to have a culture of vocation in our diocese?
First, it begins with prayer. And this is what I ask all the parishioners in every parish that I visit, confirmation or just my parish visits, and that is pray. I always ask them to remember two words, pray and invite. Pray for vocations, and it's, recognizing the importance of holy hours for vocations, that I know parishes are doing this. I hope every parish does that. It's important to be before the Blessed Sacrament to pray for vocations. But I'm asking everyone, and we've got more than 1 million Catholics in the Archdiocese of San Antonio, if every Catholic would just say, and it takes just a few seconds, the intention is very specifically, in particular, Lord Jesus, bless the Archdiocese of San Antonio once again with priests. I just know it's going to make a difference. I think we have to storm heaven. Prayer makes a difference. And the other is inviting. Just look around. Who's active in your family? Who seems to be really interested? Who asks the questions? Who wants to be the lector? Where are the young people? What are they doing in the parishes? Look for them. But also don't forget about the one that may be called that's a little bit more timid or quiet. Don't leave them out, because maybe they have that gift of prayer. And maybe that you find them before the Blessed Sacrament. Ask them if they've thought about being a priest or a religious brother or sister. So I think we have to pray and we have to invite. And it makes all the difference. I'm a priest today because my parents and my grandparents asked, have ever thought about it. They invited, they encouraged, as did my parish priest. It seems so simple, but it really is that simple.
It is. I think sometimes we're in a time in our culture in which we expect things to be more complicated and difficult. It's like the commercial I saw on TV said that fast food only took 5 minutes. So this wasn't done right. Something's wrong. And I think they think we have to have something big and complicated. I think in some way people are expecting a St. Paul kind of conversion for it. Exactly. God's going to knock you down and echo the walls and tell you you're meant to be a priest. And it doesn't always happen. It does happen every so
Sometimes happens,
but it's a rare encounter.
I heard a story the other day of one of our seminarians. It was powerful. We were asking, what really moved you? We were talking about the word desire. There has to be that desire for priesthood. We can't run to the priesthood. We can't run from anything else to say, well, I guess I'll be a priest. Or we can't do it because, well, we need priests, so I guess I better do it. He said, there has to be a desire for priesthood. Otherwise, we won't be sustained. And he said, it was real simple. The parish priest, the pastor had died in his parish. And he went to the rosary and then the funeral the next day. And at the wake service, at the rosary, the vigil, he says, he could not believe it. He was pretty young at the time. He says, there were hundreds and hundreds of people. And there were people outside and they were standing. And it came to him that's how the Spirit moved him. He says, he looked around, he says, that was just one priest. One person, he was a priest. He wasn't a famous scientist or inventor. He wasn't a wealthy tycoon. He was one parish priest that brought in hundreds and hundreds of people to pray and to celebrate his life. He says he was inspired. If one priest can make that kind of a difference, maybe I can.
Exactly.
That's the call.
That is the call.
Yeah.
I know for myself, I've had like family who say, well, don't you want kids? Don't you want a family? They're not involved in their parish if they don't really understand that question.
Yeah, because we're connected to families.
I have lots of family. Yeah. My parents became family of lots.
That's right.
All the kiddos that I baptize, all the people that I do escort through their marriage processes or assist when they need an annulment or when they're mourning and they want someone to talk to. They become our children. They become our family.
They do.
And it always drove my mom crazy. I don't know if your mom was like this. I would be telling her I'm leaving from a vacation, staying home for a little while. So I'm going home. She said, but you are home. I said, no, home is where I'm at. Home is, at the time was St. Jerome. Now home is OLG.
Right.
Home is where my people are at.
Right.
And that was home.
My parents and my siblings, they've always recognized that. They knew that was, and they loved them because they would come for festivals like your parents I'm sure do, and they'd all meet them. And my dad has since died many years ago, but he was around about 10 years into my priesthood. They loved it. They had so much fun. And my mother says she has met so many people. I mean, when I was named a bishop here, when it was just announced, my mother opened the door. My mother's a very loving, faithful, simple woman. Nothing fancy about her. She was always so, beautiful, but things that didn't take a lot, to impress her. But she opens the door and there's these beautiful flowers, gigantic arrangement of flowers. She says, "Oh, it's not my birthday. They can't be for me." And because I kind of like, you only get flowers on your birthday. And then the delivery man said, "I'm sorry, man, but these are for you." She says, "Okay." Says, brought the flowers in. And it was flowers from Archbishop Gustavo and Bishop Mike. Thank you for sharing your son with the Archdiocese. She cried, she called me, and she knew she was part of something bigger than herself. And that made such an impression on her where she understood that. That's what it meant, is that she has so many blessings, that she didn't give up a son, but she gained so many sons and priests, so to speak, and now bishops. And she thought, me, this little Czech woman, she couldn't speak English until she was in the first grade. She only spoke Czech. That she would have these opportunities. So it's a blessing. We become part of a spiritual family, and we become spiritual fathers. What a wonderful life.
It's a beautiful ministry. I can honestly say I have never been bored in my priesthood.
Me either. I haven't either. Never.
And I think those who say it, they're not doing something right.
I've never experienced it 33 plus years. I really haven't. I've been tired.
Oh, I've been
overwhelmed many times. Bored? Never. Never. we don't have enough airtime to talk about experiences.
Exactly.
Like how we're not bored.
Yeah, I know for myself, my staff, they dread when I'm driving somewhere. Because it gives my mind time to catch up and come up with new things that I'd rather work on. And so they could set a timer within 10 minutes. I was calling someone and said, hey, write this down, I'm driving, I'm not feeling this is my next idea, this is what we're going to do. And they hated it because we're finally getting everything else figured out, and then you're coming up with new ideas.
I would do the same thing. I have a little pad, and I shouldn't, but I'd write little notes or whatever. I go back and it's like, okay, I think this is the program we need to do. But in the end, guess what, Father? They do like it, though.
Yes.
Because they want their pairs to be vibrant.
Yes.
They want ideas. They want us to be leaders. And that's what we need now. We need good, strong, competent men that are faith-filled, who have a desire, a heart of a servant to answer the call. Because it's a great way of life. Priesthood is a blessing.
It is a beautiful thing. And I think that's what I'm hoping people get a chance to see in these episodes is really what it is, what a priest is like.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people, they see us at the altar and they say, oh, well, that's Father over there.
Right.
I always get, well, Father, I'm so sorry to bother you. I'm so sorry. They apologize for everything.
You're not bothering me. This is what I'm called to do. Yeah.
Exactly. I enjoy talking to people.
Right.
I enjoy spending time with them. It may be while I'm walking to something else. Will walk with me.
Right, that's right.
But I will, people don't understand me, and you've met me and maybe learned a little bit about me. When I went on my pastoral year, one of the things they asked us to do was to take the personality test. Introvert, extrovert, where do you fall on that spectrum? And it came out I'm actually more of an introvert. I'm probably, if it was a 100-point scale, I'm about 30 to 40% into the introvert side. And people look and say, there's no way. That's because you don't see what comes after all this stuff that I'm doing.
That's right.
That I can be out there all day long wanting to be at the festival, sitting in the dunking booth or whatever I'm going to do to help get people's excitement going. But then I got to go sit and recharge my batteries for a while.
In the same way.
Because I love to read, I hunt, I fish, I go outside.
Right.
Outdoors is my thing. But I've also learned I have to have that extroverted side. I have to push myself to want to be involved.
And God provides, that's the grace of the sacrament.
Exactly.
I can tell you, this is not easy doing what I have to do now as a bishop and being in front of people and giving presentations. He said, I did it as a priest, certainly, but it's a different level now as a bishop, going to meetings with all these other bishops, and I keep waiting for someone to say, excuse me, this is for bishops only. It's kind of I'm looking around when someone says bishop, it's like, oh, they're talking to me. But it's like, no, God provides, though. It really does. Because I'm an introvert, but God gives the grace needed to do His work. Because it's not our work.
Exactly.
It's the work of the Lord. And if it's about me, I'm going to fall flat on my face. And I've done that many times in my life. When we make it about Christ, because it is His church, and we're given what we need to be the men that we're called to be as priests. But we have to remain humble, grounded, balanced, in knowing who we serve.
Yeah. And I think that kind of comes all the way back around to what we started talking about a little bit with in regards to our communities that we grew up in, that difference of the rural community.
Right.
I've told some of the seminarians, it doesn't matter the size of the parish. You can be as busy or as lazy as you want to be.
That's right, exactly.
But when you invest in those people and they invest in you back, there is something very special that happens in our ministry. Because they look at us and they see us as the epitome of holy. But a lot of times for us, it's the little old lady in the front pew that's been wearing out the rosary beads. She's the one we see as holy. Or the family that we know everything they've struggled with, we've walked with them through their marriage, the illnesses of children, different things, and they're still coming. They're still praying.
And we're blessed as priests to be encountered with them. We get to accompany them. It doesn't get any better than that.
Exactly.
We get to hear the deepest, darkest struggles of their lives, and they trust us because we're priests. What a blessing. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah. So I guess as we're coming to a close in our video today, you did mention you are a vocation director. So if there's anyone watching and they have a family member they want to try to put in touch with you, how would they reach out to get a hold of you?
Our seminaries have been great. When I arrived 10 months ago, everything's on the platforms, social media platforms. You can go to Facebook, you can go to Twitter, you can go to Instagram, you can go to our regular website, just Google Vocations, San Antonio Vocations, and it will lead you there. We've got phone numbers, email us, everything that's possible, it's there. We've got lots and lots of videos for young people to watch from our seminarians. We have all kinds of materials for adults to promote vocations in their parishes and priests, and let us know. I'm the one to contact. A member of our vocation team will take the call and answer the email.
Yeah.
We'll respond, but it's exciting. We're creating a culture of vocations in San Antonio. Beautiful archdiocese. Lots of young men and women are being called. We have to keep nurturing that call.
Exactly.
So thank you for what you do.
Well, then thank you, Bishop, for your testimony, your story with us, and maybe a challenge I'll get to those who are watching. Bishop mentioned that there is something called the Lay Vocations Committee. Those who are in the parishes that are helping in a more focused way promote vocations. So maybe our challenge that can come out of our episode today, let's get one started in every single parish in our diocese.
That's my prayer.
Let's get those vocation groups, people that are actively watching, because Bishop Gary can only be in so many places at one time.
Right.
Our pastors can only be in so many places. But you guys encounter our youth. They encounter our young people. They encounter our family members. Archbishop Gustavo has always been very big from the moment he got here. Vocations do not grow on trees.
Right.
They come from families.
That's right.
And so I invite you to continue praying about how to help grow vocations in our diocese. And as that phrase I've used in almost every video, who is going to fill their shoes? Think about those priests that have been so influential in your life, your family, your parish. Who is the next one? Who is the next Monsignor Hubertus in this diocese? The Father Brian that was in Palacios that influenced Bishop Gary. Who will be those priests? Maybe it is that kiddo in your family, the one in the pew that just cannot sit still and is bouncing off the walls. Maybe they are that next priest. I encourage you to have the courage to ask them to think about it. It does make a difference, and we do appreciate it. So I thank you for tuning in for our episode today, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode for Called and Chosen.
Thank you so much for being a part of watching this vocation video series, and we're excited that you took time to do so. God has a call for each and every one of us, and maybe God is calling you to be a priest or a religious brother or sister. So don't be afraid. God's love is with you, and God will give you the strength to answer that call. If you'd like to speak with me or anyone in the vocation office, or you seek further information, go to our social media, San Antonio Vocations, or just simply look us up, Google us, and you'll find the information, and we'll get information to you as quickly as possible. God bless you, and God be with you.